sharp as a blade. "You're just a burden," he roared, his face twisted with fury. "Get out. Go struggle on your own." My heart pounded in my chest as I stood there, frozen. My mother sat beside him, her lips pressed into a thin, hard line, nodding in agreement. There was no hesitation in her eyes, no warmth, just quiet compliance, as if my suffering meant nothing to her. A cold wind rushed through the open door behind me, a cruel reminder of what was about to happen. I clutched my small duffel bag, a pathetic collection of my entire life stuffed into one worn-out piece of luggage. My hands trembled, but I refused to let them see my fear. I was their daughter, their own flesh and blood. And yet, they were throwing me away like I was nothing. "Move it," my father snapped, stepping toward me with that same disgust in his eyes he always had when he looked at me. My body obeyed before my mind could catch up. One step, another. I was on the porch now, the chill of the night sinking into my bones. My father reached for the door, ready to slam it shut, to erase me from their lives forever. But then, a chair scraped against the hardwood floor inside. A deep, steady voice cut through the tension like a knife through silk. "You shouldn't have said that," Grandpa said. And just like that, the air shifted. My father stiffened, his grip tightening on the door. My mother's head snapped up, her mouth slightly agape. Slowly, deliberately, my grandfather stood. His presence commanded the room, his old yet unshaken body still towering with authority. His piercing blue eyes locked onto my father's, unblinking. My father faltered. For the first time in my life, I saw hesitation flicker across his face. Grandpa took a step forward, his cane tapping against the floor, steady and powerful. "Sit down, boy," he ordered, his voice laced with quiet, simmering fury. My father hesitated, but only for a second. Then, like a scolded child, he stepped back inside. I stood there, my breath uneven, unsure of what was happening. Grandpa turned his head slightly, glancing at me. "You're not going anywhere, kid," he said firmly. "Not like this." I swallowed the lump in my throat. He wasn't asking. He was declaring it. And then, as I looked at my father, my supposed protector, the man who had just kicked me out like garbage, I saw it. The regret. The first crack in his armor. But I wasn't ready to forgive. Not yet. Because he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Grandpa walked past my father, as if he wasn't even there. He reached for my duffel bag and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "Come inside, sweetheart." My legs moved on their own, carrying me back into the house, past the man who had just disowned me. My father's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw locked tight, but he didn't say a word. Not with Grandpa there. Grandpa led me to the dining table, pulling out a chair for me before taking his own seat. The room was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. My mother shifted uncomfortably, staring at the floor. And then Grandpa spoke again, his voice heavy with something I had never heard directed at my father before, disappointment. "What kind of man does this to his own child?" he asked. My father scoffed, shaking his head.
"She's not a kid anymore, Dad."
"She needs to learn the real world isn't going to hand her anything." "The real world," Grandpa echoed, leaning forward. "And how exactly does throwing her into the streets help her? You think she's going to learn strength from being abandoned? She has to figure things out herself," my father said, his voice harder now. I had to. No one held my hand. Grandpa exhaled slowly, gripping the edge of the table. "You had me," he said quietly. The silence after that was deafening. My father's face darkened. "That's different." "No, it's not," Grandpa snapped, his voice rising. "I never let you starve. I never let you feel like you had nowhere to go. But here you are, doing exactly that to your own daughter." My father's lips parted, but nothing came out. I swallowed hard, watching the man who had always been my hero be torn apart by his own father's words. But strangely, I felt no satisfaction. Just exhaustion. "I'm not a burden," I said suddenly, my voice quiet but firm. "You just never saw me as anything else." My father flinched like I had struck him. And that was when I knew he had never expected me to speak up. He had expected me to cry, to beg, to disappear into the night without a fight. But I wasn't that weak little girl anymore. I wasn't his to break. Enough. My mother's voice wavered as she spoke for the first time. Dad, she. Grandpa turned his gaze to her.
And you?
What kind of mother agrees to this? She flinched, avoiding his eyes. We just thought. No, you didn't think. Grandpa cut her off. You followed. You always follow. The weight of his words settled heavily in the air. I had never seen my mother speechless before. But there she was, staring at the table, hands clenched together like a child caught stealing from the cookie jar. Grandpa sighed and turned back to me. You're coming with me. My heart leapt into my throat.
What?
You heard me, he said. Pack your things properly. You're not staying here. I hesitated, glancing at my father. His face was unreadable now, his jaw set tight, his knuckles white from clenching his fists too hard. But he didn't stop me, because he knew he had no right to any more. Without another word, I stood up, my legs shaking beneath me. I was leaving, not the way my father had planned, but on my terms. And I knew, as I walked past him, that something had changed. This wasn't just a departure. This was the beginning of something he'd regret for the rest of his life. The weight of what had just happened still clung to me as I made my way to my small room. My hands trembled slightly as I reached for my closet, pulling open the doors. The space was nearly bare, a reflection of the way I had been treated in this house, an afterthought. My father had never cared if I had enough clothes, enough warmth, enough love. I had grown up learning how to survive in the gaps between his disappointment and my mother's silence. I swallowed hard, pushing down the lump rising in my throat. I wouldn't cry.
Not now.
Grandpa was waiting for me. I wasn't being thrown away. I was being saved. I grabbed my clothes, folding them neatly before stuffing them into the only suitcase I owned. My hands brushed against a small, faded stuffed rabbit, one of the few things I had left from my childhood. I hesitated, then tucked it inside. As I turned to leave, I caught sight of myself in the cracked mirror on my wall. My face was tired, my eyes dull from years of being unseen. But there was something else there, something I had never noticed before.
Strength.
I squared my shoulders and walked out. Downstairs, the tension in the air was thick enough to suffocate. Grandpa was still sitting at the table, but his sharp eyes never left my father, who sat stiffly, gripping his glass of whiskey like it was the only thing keeping him from shattering. My mother had retreated to the far end of the kitchen, her arms wrapped around herself like a shield. They didn't look at me as I entered the room. They had already erased me. Grandpa stood up, taking my suitcase from my hand with surprising ease for a man his age. Let's go. I nodded, and together we walked toward the door. And that's when my father spoke. You'll be back. I stopped. His voice was low, dangerous, laced with quiet confidence. I turned slowly, meeting his gaze. There was something cruel in his eyes, something that said he expected me to fail. He thought the world would chew me up and spit me out, just like he had planned. I smiled, and I saw the first flicker of uncertainty cross his face. No, I said, my voice steady. I won't. And with that, I stepped out into the night, leaving behind the only home I had ever known. But I wasn't leaving with nothing. I was leaving with a fire in my heart. And one day, my father would regret every single word he had ever said to me. The car ride with Grandpa was silent at first. The darkness outside stretched endlessly, but I felt lighter than I had in years. The further we drove, the more the weight of my past lifted off my shoulders. I turned to Grandpa, who kept his eyes on the road, his hands firm on the steering wheel. Why did you stand up for me? I asked. He sighed, his expression softening. Because you deserved better. A lump formed in my throat, but I pushed it down. You never said anything before. Grandpa let out a heavy breath. I should have. I should have stepped in long before it got to this point. He glanced at me, his eyes filled with something I hadn't seen in a long time, guilt. But I won't make that mistake again. For the first time in my life, I felt safe. Grandpa didn't see me as a burden. He didn't see me as a disappointment. He saw me, and that was worth more than anything. We pulled up to his house, a small but cozy cabin on the edge of a lake. The porch light cast a warm glow, welcoming me in a way my old house never had. As I stepped inside, I felt something I had never felt before. I was home. The days turned into weeks, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was living. Grandpa taught me everything he knew. How to work with my hands, how to repair things, how to stand tall even when the world tried to knock me down. "You've got fight in you," he told me one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sun set over the lake. "Don't let anyone take that from you." I didn't plan to. I worked hard, saving up every penny I earned from odd jobs around town. I took night classes, determined to build something for myself, something my father never thought I could achieve. And as the months passed, I became someone new, stronger, wiser, unbreakable. Then came the day everything changed. I had just finished my last class when my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered, my heart pounding. "Hello." A shaky breath came from the other end. And then, "It's your mother." I nearly dropped the phone. She hesitated. "I need to see you." My stomach twisted. Memories of that night came rushing back. The way she had nodded in agreement as my father threw me out. The way she had refused to meet my eyes. I should have hung up. I should have ignored her. But something inside me told me to listen. And so I did. We met at a small cafe downtown. My mother looked different, smaller, somehow, as if the weight of her choices had finally caught up to her. She stirred her coffee, unable to look at me. "I made a mistake," she whispered. I said nothing. Tears welled in her eyes. "I let him push you away. I let him control everything. I don't know who I am without him." I exhaled slowly. "That's your problem, not mine." She flinched but nodded. I wanted to say, "I'm sorry." For a long moment, I just stared at her. And then, finally, "I forgive you." Because I wasn't doing it for her. I was doing it for me. She had let me down. But I wouldn't let her hold me back any longer. I walked out of that cafe with my head held high, my heart lighter than it had ever been. And that's when I saw him. My father. He was sitting in a car across the street, watching me. His face was unreadable, but I could see the cracks forming. He had lost his control over me. And he knew it. I smiled, turning away without a second glance. I had won. Not through revenge, but by proving him wrong. And that was the greatest victory of all. I walked away from the cafe, my heart pounding against my ribs. The weight of my mother's words still clung to me, but I refused to let it slow me down. I had spent too long carrying the burdens of others, their disappointment, their neglect, their cruelty. No more. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, I stole a glance back at the car parked across the street. My father still sat there, unmoving. His face was unreadable, his fingers gripping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white. For a brief moment, our eyes met. I expected rage. I expected the same cold, condescending stare he had given me my entire life. But this time, something was different. Regret. I didn't stop. I turned my back on him and walked away. Let him regret. Let him realize, too late, that the daughter he had cast aside had built a life without him. And let him live with the knowledge that I would never crawl back to him. Because I was finally free. The world was mine now. With Grandpa's unwavering support, I threw myself into building a future that had nothing to do with my parents' expectations. I worked harder than ever, pouring every ounce of my determination into making something of myself. By day, I took on small repair jobs, fixing broken fences, patching up leaky roofs, and even restoring old furniture. By night, I studied relentlessly, pushing through courses on business, finance, and marketing. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was thriving. And it wasn't long before people started to notice. My reputation grew in the town. My name passed around as someone who got things done, not just as John Matthews' daughter, or that girl who got kicked out. I was someone now. Someone my father could no longer control. Then came the turning point. One evening, after another long day of work, Grandpa and I were sitting on the porch, the cool night air settling over us. "You've been doing good," he said, taking a slow sip of his tea. "I see the fire in you, kid." I smiled, though exhaustion weighed heavy on my bones. I don't ever want to be in a position where someone thinks they can throw me away again. Grandpa nodded. "That's the way to think." Then, after a pause, he added, "But are you ready for what comes next?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" He set his mug down and turned to face me fully. "You're not just surviving anymore. You're building something. And soon, you'll have the chance to do more than just work for other people. You'll have the chance to stand on your own." I swallowed. "You think I can do that?" He chuckled. "I don't think. I know." And just like that, an idea took root in my mind. One that would change everything. I spent the next 6 months preparing. I poured my savings into renting a small workshop and transformed it into something more. With Grandpa's guidance, I invested in tools, equipment, and materials. Soon, I wasn't just fixing things for other people. I was running my own business. People came to me now, seeking me out for repairs, restorations, and custom work. My name spread further, reaching beyond our small town. And with every dollar I earned, every project I completed, I felt the chains my father had placed on me breaking one by one. But the real moment of victory? That came when an old, familiar name appeared on my client list. John Matthews. My father. At first, I thought it was a mistake. I stared at the request on my screen, reading and rereading the details. He wanted a consultation on some property repairs. My property repairs. My father, the man who had thrown me away, was now unknowingly reaching out to the daughter he had abandoned. For help. I sat back, my heart hammering in my chest. 1,000 thoughts ran through my mind. Should I reject the request? Should I tell him exactly what I thought of him?
No.
That would be too easy. Instead, I accepted the job. And I made sure he had no idea it was me. The meeting was set for a week later. When the day arrived, I dressed in my best work attire, confident, professional, in control. I arrived at the address, a worn-down commercial building, and waited. And then, he stepped out of his car. I hadn't seen him in years. His hair was grayer, his face more lined. But the arrogance in his posture was still the same. He didn't recognize me at first. Not until I spoke. "Mr. Matthews," I said coolly, extending my hand. "I'm here about the repair consultation." His eyes widened. And then panic. Because now he knew. The silence between us was suffocating. My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked me up and down, as if trying to process what he was seeing. I wasn't the broken, helpless girl he had kicked out. I was a woman standing on her own 2 feet, successful and independent. His mouth tightened. "You own this business?" "Yes," I said simply. His jaw clenched. "And you're the one handling my request?" "Yes." I watched as he struggled to find a way out of this. But there was none. He had come to me for help. And he knew it. I could see it happening. The slow realization, the creeping regret settling into his bones. "You did all this on your own?" he asked finally, his voice quieter now. I tilted my head. "Didn't you tell me that struggling on my own was the only way to learn?" His face darkened. He had no defense. Because I had done exactly what he had expected me to fail at. I had built something from nothing. Without him. Without his approval. Without his love.
And now he was the one who needed me.
He hesitated. For the first time in my life, I saw something close to shame in his eyes. "I made a mistake," he admitted. "I didn't flinch. Didn't waver." "Yes, you did." He exhaled, rubbing a hand over his face. "I don't expect forgiveness." "Good," I said, my voice firm. "Because you won't get it." His head snapped up, surprised. "I'm not doing this for you," I continued. "I'm doing it for me. Because I refuse to let the past define me." His shoulders slumped. He looked older now, weaker. And I realized something then. I didn't need revenge. I had already won. I completed the repairs, took his money, and walked away. And as I left, I felt lighter than I ever had before. Because for the first time in my life, I was free. Not just from him, but from the pain he had inflicted. And that was worth more than any revenge. Years later, my business flourished. I built a life filled with love, success, and happiness. And my father? He remained in the shadows, a man haunted by the daughter he had thrown away. Because the greatest punishment wasn't my hatred.